Do you find yourself in these patterns of destructive dissonance? It's like you think, I should be doing this, but I'm not sure if I want to be doing that, and I really need to be able to do this, and you feel like you're just kind of holding yourself back from being able to be successful because your mind will not let you actually perform. I'm Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions. In this week, we're talking about networking, kind of maximizing on the group dynamic and being able to network between people so that we can achieve the intentions that we set for success. And oftentimes what we find is that as we are setting our intentions for success, negative dynamic comes in again. It just is relentless. That bad brain is so relentless. And so as we are setting ourselves up and saying, this is what I want, this is what I deserve, right? The negative narrative comes in. We start to have emotional reactions. We start to doubt. We start to have fear, anxiety, what ifs, shoulda, couldas. That causes cognitive distortions or invalid data points. That pulls on our attachment. Attachment is 25% of the negative dynamic. It's kind of a big deal. Attachment gets pulled in. Our fear of abandonment, our fear of obligation or being a burden, or equitably both, that fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment, boils up to the surface. It feeds our negative narrative, this sense of value and what we deserve and what is our purpose and what we're able to achieve, our capacity. Brings in our trauma and our past stress, creates a filter or a lens of how we perceive the world and how we interact with others and how we perceive others interact with us. This invoicing that we do, which pulls up perceived expectations. And our mind is partying here. The destructing dissonance of perceived expectations. This idea, these societal standards, these external validators that we get stuck in, causes us to have some kind of explicit emotional reaction, whether that is shutting down, procrastination, or overly exploiting or explosive anger, tears, regression, perfectionism, causing more emotional reactions. And in this negative narrative or this negative dynamic, what we're doing is that we're causing more and more avoidant tendencies, procrastination, performance anxiety, causing procrastination, and then kind of flipping over to perfectionism and then back to procrastination. And we get stuck in this wheel. And yet we have not come out of avoidance. We're just layering more and more and more in our negative dynamic. Go back to the previous videos this week. We really deconstruct this in multiple ways through precognition, through internal and external validations, through the idea of being intentional and planting seeds for purpose instead of focusing on outcomes. We are deconstructing this idea that our mind wants to be in two places at once. That's what cognitive dissonance is I really want to be successful, but I don't really believe that I can or that I have the value to do it. I know that there are things that are logically, I know there are things that I can do that will put me on a track for success. Emotionally, I can't feel that I'm able to do that. And in that negative cycle, coming out of the anxious cycle, we have a distressing thought, feeling, or behavior, and that's where that negative dynamic is. Avoidance, perfectionism, procrastination, short-term relief, because we feel like we talked about this with internal and external validation. There's a feedback loop there. We think we have perceived control. That's the ooh, I'm doing something. I have internal locus of control. I think I've got this. But what we're really doing is building long-term anxiety, long-term low motivation, low value, lack of capacity, causing more distressing thought, feelings, and behaviors, more layering in the negative dynamic. So what do we do? That sounds impossible to get out of. Well, as a licensed mental health counselor and a professional brain coach, I help my clients to rebuild neural pathways to be able to immediately find a positive flow state and find that positive flow cycle. So we are eliminating the reactions, we're finding our responses, and our responses will pull us into the positive cycle. Doesn't that sound nice? And it comes from understanding what is self-imposed versus what are external expectations that are causing this performance anxiety. And so what is it that in therapy we look at our past and we look clinically at our diagnoses that are causing these self-imposed experiences. In coaching, we are looking at our actions and we're creating a clear action plan to be able to kind of cut through and do opposite action. So rewiring our brain a lot through understanding all of the internal processes that are happening and being able to find radical acceptance with those internal processing versus like this is the pattern for success. Like this is what you need to do, and you need to stop thinking and just do it, right? Go Nike, just do it. So depending on what you're looking for, if you want a why, go to therapy. If you want a how, get a coach. I do both because I have a license who taught me both and how to set boundaries depending on how to individuate on what the service is that I'm offering and how to best support the person who is seeking that growth. And so that is kind of what I offer people. And so how we identify these self-imposed expectations, this dissonance, versus what are external validations or external validators or expectations, that perceived expectation, is we start to look at kind of what the messaging is. And then we start to look at and what is ours and what is somebody else's. And what that does is it helps us to understand. And it helps us to be mindful and create a screen for ourselves that says, does this serve me? And we go back to those values. And we say, well, does this serve a value of mine? Is this my value? When I first started doing, I actually have seen tremendous growth in myself as well as my clients as I have developed this neuroscience-based framework of change. And it creates happier, healthier, more purpose-driven lives through these key step series. And in the first, technically chapter 2, because mindfulness is the foundation of wellness, and that's how I start each of my books, is through a mindful presence and developing that mindful presence. It's important for us to have that. The next chapter is success. And success says, what are your values? And as I've done these exercises over and over again, I realized that the first couple of times I would try to do my values exercise, perceived expectations would come in. And performance trauma was all over those values exercises. So I continue to share with my clients and those who bought the book, do it several times. Sit with it. This is not a one and done. This isn't, oh, now I know what success is, I'm going to go do it. It's meant to be there. That's why I give the journal reflection prompts. It's not to just say, what do I think about it right now? But use that in a routine to continually think about it, to continually be mindful and understand, why am I doing the things that I'm doing? This must be a value of mine. I keep approaching things in the same way. Is this a value of mine or is this implicit trauma? And what I found is like I said, weaving through what my values were was a lot of performance trauma. It was a lot of fear that I was holding on to and I needed to let go of. It wasn't serving me. It wasn't allowing me to be successful. It wasn't allowing me to put my processes out there. And the more that I let go of that fear, the more that I had faith and I had trust, the more that I was able to be more present and be able to actually be more productive. But that productivity now wasn't something that was anxiously driving me for a perceived expectation of not disappointing somebody. But instead, that productivity was a joy, was a way I found purpose, was an excitement that I looked forward to engaging in while trying to mitigate the balance of life. So that's what we're trying to do is get back to being mindful and saying, well, I keep doing these things. This must be a value of mine. How does this relate to the values that I have? And as we get back to what those values are, then we see, well, this is self-imposed. This was an implicit memory that I thought I had to do, which means it's also an external expectation. I thought I had to do this. It's all connected. And we come back to what our purpose is. Because if you are being perfectionistic, if you are procrastinating, you have implicit messaging saying that there's some kind of performance trauma there that you need to work on. And that language of discipline that I talked about a couple days ago, and then there's also, it just keeps coming up because it's a feedback loop. It keeps coming up. Imagine that. Talks about these shoulda, coulda statements and these musts that we must do. These are the language of discipline. This is saying that it's perceived expectation. It's not us. It's not our value. It's not our purpose. And so how do we release the grip of this perfectionism? How do we allow ourselves to collaborate with ourselves, that internal game that we talked about last week, and with others? And the way in which we do that is we find those grounded purposes. We find that positive flow state. What we try to do is be very present and purposeful with what we're doing. It comes back down to opening a space where we can be present and know exactly what we want to achieve. Be open and available to hear from others on what their goals are, and then find a unity within it. When I worked for the state of Florida, I was the principal investigator on multiple SAMHSA grants. And so a big part of what my job was as a subject matter expert for mental health was to go to all the state meetings and be able to impart clinical expertise and all of the wellness committees that are out there to help the citizens of Florida. And as I was doing this, I would say, okay, I have a system of care grant. And so what we're trying to do is plan and prepare this wraparound service technique for all of the children in Florida. We're starting in these seed communities, and the point is to bring it out so that families have a wraparound service to be fully connected in with and advocated for when it comes to mental health. And so as I talk to different people, whether it's DJJ, it's DOH, it's early childhood, it's education, no matter who I talk to, I don't just say, well, I've got this system of care grant and you got to come in, I got to be successful. No, I listen to them. I hear and I value their expertise. I hear the passion of why they chose their field. And then I impart after that, I give them that reciprocity of vulnerability of why I joined the field. And that vulnerability, that humility, the reciprocity of being available to validate somebody and their story. And then being able to say, we're not that different. I have a similar story, which is why I chose community service. That is the platform that we work on. And many times, and especially in couples or family, or anytime there's a really close relationship, that becomes, I kind of see it, I don't know if you know American Gladiators, it was kind of older. I think I even saw it as repeats on USA Network. But they would do, you would get on this platform and you would kind of battle it out, and whoever got off the platform was the winner. That's how I see a lot of couples who come into couples counseling. They get to the end. They don't see that couples relationship counseling is a master class in relating and building a strong foundation that we do not have. It's not built in us. And so it's important to have these master classes before the negative dynamic builds. But typically people get really stuck in ruts, very, very deep impacting ruts, and they cannot get out. And I talked a little bit about this a couple weeks ago with the ruts that we get in, and using the Alaskan highway as an example. It's been covered with snow and ice for like 7 months out of the year, and as it defrosts, it kind of says choose the rut that you want to be in, because it's so ingrained that you just have to run the ruts. You're not driving on the road, you're driving in the ruts, and couples get into these patterns so much. And as they're in these negative patterns, I see them on the American Gladiator platform, and they are just battling each other, just trying to find a win, trying to feel as if they're seen and heard, as if they belong, as if they have value, as if they have agency. And that is ultimately making them feel insecure and not safe. The 5 universal constructs. And so in networking, when we are able to remove ourselves from the dissonance, what we're doing is creating a platform that is inviting and loving, and a beautiful space that is safe for not only us, but who we invite in it. And as we do that, we're listening to them. We are actively listening. The very first chapter, of course, chapter 2, because chapter 1's mindfulness, is about interpersonal skills, the basics of being able to validate others and make them feel seen and heard, so that they are available to you to validate you, and the 5 universal constructs. And so in networking, when we are able to remove ourselves from the dissonance, what we're doing is next week, we're talking about the empathy algorithm. It is here. And that empathy algorithm will say the same thing of these basic things that we need to do to follow suit so somebody can feel seen and heard, so that you can build in a relationship, even if you don't have, and we'll break down why we don't have the bandwidth to be emotionally available. There's a lot of reasons why, so subscribe and stay tuned. We start to have this understanding and this validation of what other people's story is, and then we start to share our story as it is a harmonious experience, as if our stories overlap in a way. And as we are finding how that story overlaps, we are slowly guiding them to this is how we can both be successful together. And that's the ultimate goal of networking. And when we can let go of and understand why we have dissonance on these destructive perceived expectations, and we can let go of that negative dynamic, we can truly be available to ourselves, use that precognition to be able to intuitively drive the goals that we have through being available to others. And why this doesn't happen, and why it feels like a great thing that for other people and not ourselves, is because neuroscience, the brain will say that this isn't the way, that this is a high stress event. We're causing stress because we're causing performance anxiety, because we're causing perceived expectations of what we should and could be doing, of what if it all goes wrong? What if we have nothing? We're losing faith in ourselves. We're losing, and we are actually gaining a lot of fear and doubt. And as we're doing that, we are pulling ourselves into that amygdala. We're pulling ourselves into fight, flight, or freeze, and we're just trying to battle out of it. And so as we're doing that, we're removing ourselves from response, and we're actively engaged in reaction. And that will get us nowhere. That is how we hold ourselves back, because we're not getting to the door, and we're not going through the doorway to success. We're barely on the pathway. We're on the pathway that prevents success. And so when we can find that we are in a present state, then our brain is grounded. We're deep breathing. We're breathing through that dissonance. We are finding and being curious, zooming out and seeing what are these people, what's the motivation here? Like, what do they want? And we're not people pleasing because, those anxious high achievers love to people please, right? And we're constantly, what do you think they're wanting out of this? Because I need to give them exactly what they want. They've got to like me, right? That external validation that we talked about yesterday. And then we're not people pleasing. We're saying, okay, I see where the theme is and what you're asking for and what serves you and what value you're presenting in front of me. And I am acknowledging what your value is. And I am sharing with you what my value is equitable to yours. And with our powers combined, we can double that value if we work together. And you can achieve this goal, which is yours, and I can achieve this goal, which is mine. And it's 5 universal constructs. I'm telling you, things are more alike than they are different. But our mind and that dissonance and those perceived expectations and that emotional dysregulation and those cognitive distortions and all of our trauma and past and negative narrative and attachment, they'll tell you and they'll make you believe that we are more different than we are alike. But ultimately, we are all united under these 5 universal constructs. We all have the same needs. And when we can connect with what those needs are, then we can connect with our authentic, true self. We can connect with the authentic needs of others, and we can improve the teams that we're on, the relationships that we have, the desires that we have for certain relationships can all harmoniously come together. My books, Key Steps to Living a Happier and Healthier Life, go through all of this. We look at what our values are, the stressors that pull us from our values, how to make effective critical decisions, how people thwart us from making effective critical decisions. Those atomic habits and vulnerability, which is so crucial to having humility and building true, meaningful relationships. Then we go into part 2 for emotional resilience, and we really look at our side of the street and what we're doing that pulls us into a reactionary place and how to pull away from reaction and go into response. And then we take all of our knowledge and our wellness and we interact with other people, and then we master the ability to network and engage in achieving our success goals that we identified in part 1. Zooming out, finding neutrality, and being able to see that other people are going through the same things that we just healed ourselves from in part 2. And putting it all together in part 3 as we maximize, because the point in life is to build communities, is to put processes out there so that you can help others achieve their outcomes and they can help you achieve your outcomes. And this is what that networking is when we remove the dissonance, we're putting our processes out there and we are actively engaging in what it is that will make us successful and help others to make them successful. I'm Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Today's insights helped you to reflect more on insights on how to live more intentionally in your relationships or in your professional or personal growth. Please give this video a like and thumbs up and share it with others who could also use the insight and support. Each week, I dive into these real strategies that are coming out of my book, Key Steps to Live a Happier and Healthier Life, Part 3, Interpersonal Effectiveness. So please be sure to subscribe and to join us each week to learn more about how to create deeper, more meaningful connections, set healthier boundaries, and live a purpose-driven life. All of the principles I teach in my workbook. Your growth matters, so thank you for being here. Let's keep building a happier and healthier life together, one step at a time.